People always told me I was lucky. Lucky to have a husband who worked hard. Lucky to have children who were healthy. Lucky to live in a safe neighborhood, in a quiet American town where nothing ever seemed to go wrong. I nodded every time someone said it, because from the outside they were right. But no one ever asked how it felt to live inside my life. I learned early how to survive by being quiet. I grew up in a house where emotions were inconvenient. My parents weren't abusive, but they were distant, tired from their own lives, their own disappointments. I learned quickly that expressing feelings only made things awkward. So I stopped. I became the good girl, the one who didn't complain, the one who handled things on her own. By the time I reached adulthood, being strong wasn't something I chose, it was who I was expected to be. I married young, not out of deep passion, but out of stability. My husband felt safe, reliable, predictable, and at the time, that felt like love. The early years were fine, comfortable, routine. We worked, paid bills, built a family, did all the things adults are supposed to do. And somewhere along the way, I stopped checking in with myself. I became a wife before I became a woman, a mother before I understood who I was, a caretaker before I learned how to care for myself. I carried everything, the schedules, the worries, the emotional weight of keeping everyone okay. I knew which child needed extra attention, which family member was upset, which silence meant something was wrong. I noticed everything, but no one noticed me. When I felt overwhelmed, I told myself other women handled more. When I felt lonely, I told myself marriage wasn't supposed to feel exciting forever. When I felt invisible, I told myself I was being dramatic. I was good at talking myself out of my own pain. My husband wasn't cruel. That's important to say. He didn't yell. He didn't cheat. He didn't hurt me physically. But he also didn't see me. We talked about logistics, never about feelings. About responsibilities, never about dreams. If I tried to open up, the conversation always ended the same way. You're just tired. Things will calm down. You worry too much. So I stopped trying. I learned how to smile through family dinners while feeling empty. How to laugh at jokes while feeling disconnected. How to be present while emotionally absent. At night, when the house was quiet, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling. That was when the heaviness came. Not sadness exactly, more like a dull ache in my chest. A feeling that something was missing, but I couldn't name it. I missed being known, not needed, not depended on, known. I remember one night sitting in my car after grocery shopping, hands still on the steering wheel, tears running down my face for no clear reason. I wasn't sad about groceries. I was grieving myself, the woman I used to be, or maybe the woman I never got to become. Days turned into years. I kept functioning. That's the dangerous part. From the outside, nothing looked wrong. I showed up. I handled things. I did everything right. And yet, something inside me kept whispering, this can't be all there is. I ignored that voice for a long time, because listening to it would mean admitting that the life I built, the life everyone admired, was slowly draining me. And admitting that felt selfish, ungrateful, dangerous. So I stayed quiet. I kept giving, kept sacrificing, kept disappearing, not knowing that silence has a cost. And one day, that cost would be too high to ignore. By the time I realized how heavy my life had become, I was already bent under the weight of it. It didn't happen suddenly. It happened slowly, so slowly that I adjusted without noticing. Every year, I carried a little more. Every day, I asked for a little less. I was the emotional center of my family, even when no one acknowledged it. If the kids were struggling, they came to me. If something felt off, I noticed it first. I was the one who remembered appointments, permission slips, birthdays, medications, moods. I carried the invisible work, the kind that doesn't come with praise or paychecks. And when I was exhausted, people said things like, "You're so strong. I don't know how you do it all." They meant it as a compliment. But strength can feel like a cage when you're never allowed to be weak. At home, my marriage grew quieter. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. We talked about schedules, bills, groceries, repairs. We didn't talk about how we were changing or how lonely we were becoming. Sometimes I'd try. I feel overwhelmed, I'd say carefully. My husband would nod, distracted. "You've got a lot going on," he'd reply. "It'll pass." But it didn't pass. It settled in. I stopped bringing things up because every attempt left me feeling foolish for expecting more. I learned to take up less emotional space. I learned how to anticipate everyone else's needs while ignoring my own. And slowly, resentment grew quiet and heavy. I resented being the default parent. I resented being the emotional caretaker. I resented that no one noticed how close I was to breaking. And then I resented myself for feeling that way, because nothing was wrong enough to justify how unhappy I felt. I wasn't abused. I wasn't abandoned. I wasn't unloved, at least not in obvious ways. So I told myself my pain didn't count. But pain doesn't disappear just because you invalidate it. It waits. My body started speaking for me. I had headaches that wouldn't go away, trouble sleeping, a constant tightness in my chest that doctors called stress. They suggested rest, exercise, less caffeine, but rest doesn't fix emptiness. I began feeling disconnected from my own life, like I was watching it happen to someone else. I smiled on autopilot, answered questions automatically, laughed when expected. Inside, I felt hollow. One afternoon, I sat in my car in the driveway for nearly an hour, unable to bring myself to go inside. The house felt like a place where I was needed, not wanted. And that realization broke something inside me. I wasn't running from my family. I was running from the version of myself that existed only to serve others. I started wondering who I would be if no one needed anything from me. That question scared me, because I didn't have an answer. At family gatherings, people praised my marriage. "You two are solid," they'd say. "You're lucky to have each other." I smiled and nodded while feeling like a fraud. Because love shouldn't feel this lonely. At night, lying next to my husband, I felt miles away. Not angry, not bitter, just unseen. I wanted to be asked how I was and have the question matter. I wanted someone to notice when I went quiet, when I withdrew, when I stopped asking for anything. But no one did. And the lonelier I felt, the quieter I became. That's how women disappear, not through violence, but through neglect. I began questioning myself. Maybe I was asking for too much. Maybe this was just adulthood. Maybe happiness was unrealistic. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. A life built on self-erasure eventually collapses. And mine was starting to crack. People think breakdowns are loud. They imagine screaming matches, slammed doors, or dramatic exits. Mine was quiet. It started with exhaustion so deep that sleep didn't touch it. I woke up tired. I went to bed tired. Every day felt heavy before it even began. I kept telling myself to push through. That's what women like me do. We push through sadness. We push through loneliness. We push through pain until it settles into our bones. I ignored the signs for as long as I could. The constant headaches, the tight chest, the sudden tears that came out of nowhere. I told myself I was just stressed. But stress doesn't make you feel like you're slowly disappearing. The breaking point came on an ordinary morning. The kids were getting ready for school. My husband was rushing to work. Everyone needed something from me at the same time. I stood in the kitchen holding a coffee mug, listening to the noise, and suddenly felt dizzy. The room started spinning. My heart raced. My hands shook. I couldn't catch my breath. I thought I was having a heart attack. I locked myself in the bathroom and slid down onto the floor, gasping for air, terrified that this was how it ended, not with drama, but with me collapsing quietly while everyone else went on with their day. By the time it passed, I was shaking and exhausted. Doctors later called it a panic attack, but panic attacks don't come from nowhere. They come from years of swallowing your truth. After that day, I couldn't pretend anymore. My body had said what my mouth refused to say. I wasn't okay. I started noticing how much effort it took just to exist. Simple things felt overwhelming. Making dinner felt like climbing a mountain. Conversations felt draining. Noise made my chest tighten. I felt fragile in a way I never had before. And still, I felt guilty. Guilty for struggling. Guilty for not being grateful. Guilty for wanting something I couldn't even define. One night, after the kids went to bed, I sat across from my husband at the kitchen table. I didn't plan the conversation. The words just came out. "I'm not okay," I said quietly. He looked surprised. "What do you mean?" "I feel empty," I said. "I feel lonely. I feel like I'm losing myself." He listened, but he didn't understand. "I don't know what you want me to do," he said. "Everything seems fine." That sentence broke me, because everything looked fine. And that was the problem. I realized then that I had been living in a marriage where my pain had no language, where emotional absence was invisible because it left no bruises. I tried to explain. "I need to feel seen," I said. "I need emotional connection." He looked overwhelmed. "I provide. I'm here. I don't know what more you want." I stopped talking. Not because I had nothing left to say, but because I finally understood he couldn't hear me. That night, I cried in the shower so the sound wouldn't escape. I cried for the woman I used to be, for the years I spent shrinking, for the version of myself that believed love meant endurance. I knew then that something had to change, not because my husband was cruel, but because I was disappearing. I started therapy soon after. The first session, I cried the entire time, not because I was weak, but because someone was finally listening. The therapist asked questions no one had ever asked me before. When did you stop prioritizing yourself? What are you afraid would happen if you spoke up? Who are you outside of your roles? I didn't have answers. I had spent my life being what others needed. I didn't know who I was without that. As weeks passed, therapy became a mirror I couldn't avoid. I saw how often I minimized myself, how often I avoided conflict to keep peace, how often I measured my worth by how useful I was. And I saw something else too. I had been emotionally abandoned not just by my marriage, but by myself. I had learned early that being easy made me lovable, and I had carried that lesson into every part of my adult life. I tried one last time to bridge the gap with my husband, not with blame, not with anger, with honesty. I can't keep living like this, I said. I'm not asking you to change overnight. I'm asking you to see me. He looked tired, confused. I don't know how, he said. And in that moment, a painful truth settled in my chest. Sometimes two people can care deeply and still be emotionally incompatible. That realization felt like grief. Grief for the future I imagined. Grief for the years I invested. Grief for the hope I kept alive far longer than it deserved. I began imagining my life if nothing changed. Another 5 years of silence. Another decade of emotional loneliness. Another lifetime of being strong while breaking inside. The thought made my chest tighten again. I knew then that staying wasn't neutral. Staying was a choice, and it was costing me my sense of self. I didn't know yet what leaving would look like. I didn't know how I would survive the fallout, but I knew one thing with certainty. I couldn't keep betraying myself just to keep everything looking okay. That was the day my silence ended. Leaving doesn't always begin with packing bags. Sometimes it begins with a decision so quiet no one else notices. Mine started the morning I woke up and realized I couldn't keep abandoning myself just to keep everyone else comfortable. I didn't leave my marriage right away. I stayed, but differently. I stopped pretending. I stopped over-explaining. Stopped fixing everything. Stopped absorbing emotional neglect like it was normal. And that alone changed everything. The house felt different when I stopped performing happiness. Silence became louder. My husband noticed. You've changed, he said one evening. I had to, I replied. I was disappearing. That was the first time I said it without apology. Healing wasn't instant. Some days, I felt strong and clear. Other days, guilt crushed me. I questioned myself constantly. Was I selfish? Was I breaking my family? Was I overreacting? But therapy taught me something life never had. You are not wrong for wanting to be emotionally alive. I began reclaiming small pieces of myself. I took walks alone. I read books I liked. I said no without explaining. At first, it felt uncomfortable, even wrong. I had been conditioned to believe my needs were optional. But slowly, something shifted. I could breathe again. The panic attacks faded. The tightness in my chest loosened. The fog in my mind began to lift. I wasn't fully healed, but I was waking up. One night, sitting alone in my car after grocery shopping, I cried. Not from pain, from relief. For the first time in years, I felt present in my own life. Eventually, my marriage reached a truth we could no longer avoid. We had built a life on stability, not connection. We talked honestly this time. No blame, no yelling, just truth. We realized love isn't just about staying. Sometimes love is about letting go. The decision to separate wasn't dramatic. It was heartbreaking but peaceful. I grieved deeply. The marriage, the version of me who tried so hard, the dream that didn't survive reality. But grief didn't break me. It freed me. Living alone was terrifying at first. The quiet felt heavy, but slowly, it became sacred. I learned who I was without roles. Not just a wife, not just a mother, not just the strong one, just me. I made mistakes. I doubted myself. I rebuilt piece by piece. And something beautiful happened. I started trusting myself again. Today, my life isn't perfect, but it's honest. I laugh without forcing it, rest without guilt, speak without fear. I no longer measure my worth by how much I sacrifice. I choose myself not because I'm selfish, but because I finally understand you cannot pour love into others from an empty soul. If you're watching this and feeling that quiet ache, if you're doing everything right but still feel lost, please know this. You're not weak. You're not ungrateful. You're not broken. You're awakening. And sometimes awakening feels like loss before it feels like freedom. Have you ever stayed in a relationship where you felt emotionally alone? At what point does loyalty become self-betrayal? If choosing yourself meant disappointing others, would you do it? Share your story in the comments. Your voice matters more than you know. If this story touched your heart, if it felt like someone finally said what you've been feeling, please subscribe for more real, emotional, true life stories about women, healing, love, and rediscovering yourself. You're not alone here, and your story deserves to be heard.